All right, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you could join us today for the third in our speaker series, Prioritize to Propel Re-energizing Annual Giving. I'm Mel Pomerodakis, a Vice President with Rotolo Associates, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by Teresa Schubeck, our Executive Vice President. A few logistics first. Please feel free to add questions into the Q&A throughout our conversation today. I'll be monitoring that and ensure that we get to addressing those key concerns. And if there's anything additional at the end, we'll try and save a little bit of time so that we can do a little Q&A before we wrap in the hour. Other than that, following this, you'll be receiving a copy of both the slides and the recording. So if you're taking notes, just know that you'll have those accessible to you when we're completed. So I'd like to introduce Teresa Schubeck, hand it to her to just give a little bit of a background on herself and our firm before we begin.
Very good. Thanks, Malpo. We're very pleased you're here with us today. And as I was looking at these little building blocks on the left, which we've heard from clients through our client surveys, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today, outreach to those that are important to us. These three words were used to describe our firm: agile, responsive, and innovative. And I think they're probably three very good words that we could use to talk about annual giving and what we need to accomplish. Our firm was founded in 1979. We're a full-service philanthropic consulting firm, which does include an executive search component. So those of you or those you know of that may be looking for a development or executive professional, CEO, or executive director, we do conduct those searches. If you are actually even looking for a position, we may have a search open that you would be interested in. We serve all types of non-profits. We're part of the Collegium family, and there's about 15 of us on our team. We are proud to be a member of the Giving Institute, the hallmark for ethical fundraising. And of those 41 years of the firm, I've been with the firm for 25 years. Prior to that, I worked at two educational institutions, one being a university, and that was for 12 years. And I say that also because my first position in development was as Director of Annual Giving. And some of the lessons that I learned then, and it's a great place to not only cut your teeth in development, but become a very honed and precise expert in the field of annual giving. But things I learned then, that many years ago, are still true, I think. Annual giving being personalized, segmented. In the case of the university, we had multiple schools we were raising money for. We had a parents fund. We treated board members differently and separately, distinctly. We had a senior gift program in order to introduce giving to students while they were on campus so they could think about that when they graduated. And we dealt with annual giving during a campaign. So some of that is a blueprint for what I'll talk about today and what I revisit with every single project we're working on. And I will say, in thinking about this, probably every day do something with annual giving, no matter what. And probably at least once a week have a very strategic conversation about it with a client. It's that important, and it's that much of a lifeblood to the money that you'll be raising.
Fantastic. Thank you, Teresa. So that's why we're so pleased to have Teresa spearheading this conversation, because it truly is such a rich part of her history and expertise that she can share with a lot of experiential content and examples that will help kind of illustrate these key points. So while Teresa's been with the firm 25 years, my association with the firm goes back 29, though I have not had a full tenure with the firm. I've had my own practice as well as operating as a certified professional coach. I've been pleased in the last 5 years to bring all of those skills and experience to Rotolo Associates, and again, serve as a member of the executive team. And pleased to be a part of, as my business development hat, presenting these webinars to you. So my role today will be to really frame this up for Teresa's core content. So what brought us together today? Our survey, and we thank you all for your thoughtful responses, quick responses to our survey, what's keeping you up at night as advancement professionals? We know this is such an incredible time to be doing the good work that you're doing, and things have been highlighted and amplified. And this topic, annual fund giving, was the second of your priorities. We had many of you that said all of the above, and we knew that just the whole comprehensive nature of advancement was going to be impacted by all of the issues that are surrounding us right now. Last week, we addressed re-envisioning events, but this, as Teresa said, is that lifeline and that lifeblood of an institution, annual giving. So really pleased to be able to address that with you, taking a deeper dive. So what are our 3 highlights today? How are we going to break this down? Similarly to our others, if you've been joining us in our series, is first to really just acknowledge and validate the compounding influences that we're facing right now. And then look at qualifying the impact of enhanced annual giving, because as this core, it can be kind of tempting in these times to veer off. You may get some pressure to do a special appeal, something that's directed elsewhere, but we really want to make sure that we are giving you some guidance and directive and tangible takeaways to help enhance this core that is really central to your institution's viability. And so that's where Teresa will really be discussing some innovative approaches to engage friends and funds. Because again, the annual fund is a great channel for us to fill the funnel for those prospects that, while they may be, a modest annual giver, may have the capacity down the line with great cultivation to be a much more substantial supporter or leader within our institution. So let's look at the factors that are surrounding us. As we know, we are in, I think, starting month 5 of COVID-19. And that was the sort of the central part that brought us together and kind of the rallying point around which we had to redefine and refine what we're doing. But since then, we've had all of these tangential issues that are creating some ripples in our work. Anything from the economic impact, and that may be the broader global economics, to your institution's economics. If you have some things that are very much limiting your revenue streams, even beyond annual giving, there may be economic constraints that you're feeling, again, institutionally, professionally, and personally, that are impacting your work. Equity, this is such a piece that, while it is addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're also finding, and I had this conversation with a coaching colleague yesterday, that it's also about equity of access. When we are talking about schools and institutions that maybe are needing to do, again, this online learning, what about those remote areas without internet access? What about students without the tools that they need? So this equity really kind of goes across the board. And it can be something that institutions, like several of our clients, are feeling internally and having to address. The notion of being remote and maintaining your relevance, we've been talking about that from the beginning of this, that there are challenges. And part of this is simply to acknowledge that this is a very different way to work, and that the stressors that you're feeling are real, that the impact on your work and your creativity is significant, and it's something that you just want to be able to recognize and be aware of, so that as you look to strategies to move beyond, you can then, again, try to access the things that will help you think a little more creatively, to tap into that agility and innovation that Teresa addressed. So let's talk about the whys, the 3 whys of annual giving. And this will be where I'll just tip this over to Teresa after here. But we really think often of the annual fund is that point of entry to a regular relationship with an institution. It's that first invitation beyond a fundraiser or an event. I might have been invited, as a matter of fact, I was just talking with a friend this morning about a gala that's going virtual. That was my first introduction to an event. Well, that has now since then tipped to becoming an annual supporter of that organization. And so it's one to the other, but now I have that ongoing relationship. And that's really that piece where it is about building relationship and rapport. The other piece that we think about in the whys for annual giving is that it is truly mission driven. This is about, again, the fundamental operation of your institution. It's fully supporting mission. So rather than a campaign, which may have some very specific focused initiatives or other special appeals, this is about your annual operating support, the what and why and how of what you do. So when people have a belief in that, it's a true reflection of their belief in mission. And that's something so important, as Teresa touches on these additional pieces, things like donor retention. That's really important to ensure that we are staying aligned to mission. And for those of you that have been joining us over the many weeks, it's something we reinforce heartily. And finally, it's the practice of sustained giving. It creates those patterns, those habits. As we've been talking and doing surveys with donors for clients on various subjects, one of the things we asked about was, how has COVID-19 impacted your giving? And without exception, in the most recent study that I did, they all said, we're continuing to give to all of those institutions that have been important to us. We are not changing our giving. We may add a little bit here or there, but those that we believe in, that we support on a regular basis, we are continuing. And so that's, again, the value and impact of that annual giving relationship. So with that, I'm going to tip over to Teresa to really take the deep dive into this.
Right. So we're going to use the number 3 a lot today. And Malpo, you just reminded me about another point of the number 3, and that we like to say that you want to keep your donors engaged, and you being one of the top 3 on their list of those that they're going to contribute to. Because we found for many years, but most recently in 2008 with the Great Recession, that frequently prospects or donors might draw a line at the top 3 if they were going to be cutting back or tightening their philanthropic belts or whatever. So again, this all speaks to relationship and communication. So 3 keys to building momentum. Stewardship, all about relationships. So we're in the relationship business. You don't want to stop the momentum of their annual giving. You want to have an annual fund by its nature every single year, no matter what else is happening. There are different techniques and different ways to go about it if you're in a campaign, but you don't want to stop it. You want to build the identity of the annual fund, and you want to build their identity as a donor, as a consistent and persistent donor to it. And remembering that asking for a gift is really a relatively small part of the relationship that you're in within that, with that prospect or with that donor. So the time that you're actually asking, if you think about all the time you should be spending communicating and listening and engaging in conversation with them, actually soliciting their gift is a relatively small portion. The second key to building relationship is message and mission plus. So mission, mission, mission. We could have that 3 times if we'd like. You need to stay on course. You don't want to chase money just because there might be opportunities available or something that you might think is a little bit eye-catching or clever that you see someone else in your community doing. So you want to stay mission central, mission centered. You want to test your mission and message, though, test your message. Message only is what you're testing. And we're going to show you some ways to do that. And the third thing is that you may change or adjust the way you speak about your mission. And you may, in fact, draw themes or ideas in from what else is happening in the environment. But again, keeping mission central. And segmentation, which, too many years ago, I was referencing with my years at a university with our annual appeal. But, that's when segmentation was first starting to be possible electronically with what we could do in terms of database segmentation, personalization of letters, and opportunity to increase giving. And I'm going to read you 3 sentences from Benjamin Franklin that I always like to think about or refer to. This was after a friend came to him to ask him for some help in fundraising, and he refused to turn over his prospect list. So instead he gave advice. And what he says is, I advise you to apply to all those whom you know will give something first, next to those whom you are uncertain about whether they will give anything or not. And you might even want to show them the list of those who have already given. And lastly, do not neglect those who you are sure will give nothing, for in some of those you may be mistaken. So segmentation from Ben Franklin, and I think everlasting or evergreen, I would say, approach to annual giving, certainly. So we're going to pick apart or deconstruct each of these, beginning with stewardship on the following slide. So anecdotally, it's my understanding that after the 2008 crash, I did read a study. I was searching for the reference for this. I'm not even sure that the reference is as important as the lesson here. point being that those shops, those development shops that invested in donor relations, showed an increase of 19%, and those that didn't were down 9%. Whether those percentages are absolutely accurate or not, I know what is an absolute truth, and that there's a significant swing between those who thought about how they were going to cultivate relationships when there might have been somewhat of a pause in asking, or when there might have been a diminishment of whether a prospect could give or not. They kept in contact and communication with those donors, and that's what led to their success. Who's Lois Bell? A professional I knew many years ago who was one of the first donor relationship professionals that I think was hired at an institution, or at least at the institution that I was working in. And it was her idea to have this new role, which was donor stewardship. Yes, Lois had the gift of gab, but she had an even more powerful tool, which was that of listening, or being able to draw out from people tremendous information and contacts with them. Those of you who have been in the field for a while may remember what we used to call reports, and they would be typed out and put in files. Now they're put onto Razor's Edge notes section or other parts of the database. And I don't know that they're put there with as much richness or detail as Lois would be able to extract from prospects. She would call people who gave $250 or more on any one shot for annual giving. She was never, she always had something to do. Not because we had thousands and thousands and thousands of $250 donors, but because she used each conversation and each relationship to move to a next step with that prospect. So she'd call them to thank them, and then that would lead to knowing more about them, learning more about them, thinking about the next step, visiting them, calling them, etc., leading to larger gifts. I wrote here, what is your favorite pie? She knew that almost about everybody, or what their favorite something was. And when she visited, she would bring that to them. And boy, wasn't that flattering for them to know that Lois and her team knew what was special to them. So you can be an annual giving director, even a one-person shop, and remember those that you want to call to say thank you and to listen to, or to use volunteers to do that. One of the most startling facts that Malpo and I found from the Giving USA webinar that was presented with the giving results for 2019 is donor retention remaining flat at 45%. So we thought, gee, just that alone could be the core, the foundation, the building block for a development program. So looking at that factor, if you don't know what it is for your organization or institution, something to look at and to build upon, because the best prospect is the one that has already given. You want to make sure that you do have repeat donors. There's been case awards over the years, there may still be, for those that have donor growth over a 5-year period or over an extensive period. And why do organizations like CASE or others provide awards? Is because they know how critical that is to building the donor base. So sustaining those that have given, especially in year 2, when you know then you have them, a better chance of having them for even the longer term. So in stewarding relationships, on the next slide.
If I may, Teresa, just for a moment,
yes. Mm-hmm.
on donor retention, I think one of the things too, and I was thinking back on the previous slide about mission, many of you might be in a position where you have board members or other parts of your administrative or leadership team that might be compelled to have you pivot to something else, to kind of divert your messaging to be more appealing in this current climate. And this is a statistic that I think, and the statistic that you have for yourself, bless you, to be mindful of as you are articulating your case. Because when an institution starts to have mission creep or mission diversion, that's when you can begin to lose that retention. And so that key piece of, you can always look at how is our mission relevant in this time, but knowing that you stay true to that, and even as Teresa will talk about later, tapping into what that mission means to your donors is really critical. And these can be statistics and data that can help you really take that to your board and your leadership to reinforce the need to stay on target with messaging.
Thank you, Malpo. You know why that's extremely important? I just had a conversation about that this morning with a client who a couple of eager board members wanted to be changing messaging, and looking here, looking there, talking about how boring annual giving is, et cetera. It happens all the time, and it's our role as development professionals to remind them that this is the lifeblood of an institution, budgeted in, and we can find creative ways to message, but we can't defer dollars to something other than that. So here's some stewarding relationships, all I think pinning the word listening, which we spoke about a minute ago. Having conversations with people, formal or informal. Our firm is frequently hired to do this, to be speaking with prospects or donors and listening in an objective way to what they have to say. A lot of that you can do on your own if you want to be gathering their opinion in a formal or informal way. Surveys, which can be done via phone or electronically, very easy to do. Melpo's survey, which she referred to at the beginning, was asking people's opinion. It was a one-question survey. Frankly, I doubted it at first. Saw the value in it, loved it, and it provides us with a lot of good information. And the third is retention, which that's going to be another theme of what we speak about today. Don't lose who you have. And I think stewarding and paying attention to people is a big part of that. You do want to build a culture of gratitude. Somebody used that term. We've all used that term, but somebody just used it the other day on a call. And I thought it was very appropriate, but I want to say, show your gratitude in measure. And so what situation could you find yourself in is to overthink. I think most organizations underthink, I'll say that. But I think you could find yourself in a situation of overthanking a more modest donor that then is a little bit confused about what their place is in that charity or in that to that nonprofit. Does that make sense to you, Melpo, the way I stated that?
It does. And it's interesting, Teresa. I had a conversation with a colleague not long ago, a client actually, about the distinction between appreciation and gratitude. And gratitude being recognition for a specific gift or a specific something. But this concept of appreciation, I think, fits very nicely in stewarding relationships, because you're expressing appreciation for the role they play in your institution. And that, to your point, gets to them understanding and defining their connection and engagement and the value they add to advancing the mission of your institution. So think about appreciating their role and appreciating what it is that they do. People want to feel as though they're adding value. They want to see what that value is in terms of their monetary gift, but also want to understand if there are ways that their other gifts can be applied as well, especially if it's a place they have a relationship with.
So I'm going to give you an idea or an example here next of some donor stewardship. Now, lest you be tempted to say, well, sure, Columbia could do this, I would say in return, look at, even Columbia has to do this. So just 2 weeks ago, maybe, I guess, I started to, as a result of a participatory level gift, as one who's paying college tuition. It was admittedly a participatory level gift, but nonetheless, I wanted to be part of the parents' fund at Columbia College, Columbia University. So I made a gift back 6 or 8 months ago. Just 2 weeks ago, started to get 3 things here, and I call it the trifecta. We frequently speak about feelings, facts, and future, and when I resurrected these stewardship messages, I thought they've hit all 3 things. First, I got this email from a student profile, talked about thank you for the gift to the college fund, right? So this, to me, checked the box of future. Look at what we're doing for Jackson. He's, his little vignette there is extraordinarily impressive, and we know he's going to go on to great things. So I feel great about the investment I've made in the future of Jackson and my daughter as well. And on the next slide, as part of our trifecta, there were 2 other things that happened all in relatively quick succession. I got a voice message there from a young woman named Nicole. She introduced herself that way. This is the transcript of her voicemail she left for me. It's very straightforward and simple. But on the other hand, she had a smile in her voice. She expressed gratitude. I was happy to hear it. I was happy to hear that I wasn't forgotten. And frankly, I would say, as an experienced development professional, I still felt that I was not jaded as a donor and was therefore able to listen and appreciate, and it taught me to remember that everybody likes to be thanked. And then the third thing a couple days later was a report. I didn't include the whole thing, but just gave perspective. It was an update on what the Columbia College Parents Fund was. So they hit the facts there. So right, I had the three things: facts, feelings, and future, all in one fell swoop. What I also received, which is not here, was you don't have to be Columbia University to thank people, to steward them. Like many of you on the call, I'm sure I was drawn to contribute to a local food bank, who I knew about but had not previously contributed to. But in the early days of the pandemic, thought there's an awful lot of people who need this kind of help, and researched it, contributed online, etc. Got an email from the executive director. They live on a shoestring, this organization. Nonetheless, they sent an email of thanks. And I was even more impressed and will continue to contribute. A part of her email of thanks was, I'm going to send you a letter when I can get to the office, but I want to tell you now how happy I was for your gift. And so you don't have to be a big university to give a time-sensitive thank you. Yes.
Oh, God, I was just going to say, and with that, this is an excellent place to be able to utilize volunteers and even non-traditional volunteers who may be, retained at home. Maybe they're not working or working less, or maybe they don't have as much outreach, seniors particularly. But if you've got a particular constituency that may be tapped in to make some of these calls, have some of that conversation, a little scripting and counsel can go a long way in. So you're kind of doing two things. You are connecting with your donors, but that peer-to-peer can have a really valuable impact as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I looked at this thinking that with the development hat, professional hat, I know they're going to ask me again soon for another gift. And that's okay, because this is fine. It's the start of the school year. They're on my mind. Let's have at it. So that's just fine. So just the topic, maybe a little bit of a side note, but to gift or not to gift, again, it's up to you. But I will say that based on feedback that you can get in some of the surveys that we referenced, you can find out what people's sentiments are about whether or not they want you to use any of their donation as a gift. Some people, this is a nominal item. Some people appreciate it. Some people think you're wasting time or money. So get to know your donor base and see what might be right for you, what level of gift might be right for you. Malpa, I don't know if you have anything to say about that. We were kind of comparing gift ideas and thinking it was kind of case by case basis, really.
Absolutely. And I think you want to think about it in terms of the scale of the gift and what the giveaway is. And that's also an opportunity in addition to what your constituents are responsive to, but what's the value in terms of raising brand awareness? My university, I got an umbrella, and it's one of those things which is kind of just a public promotion when I'm out and about. So thinking about what kind of exposure it gives your brand is also another valuable.
Yeah, and full disclosure, these are not Columbia socks, so I'm not advertising them yet again, another institution.
Wasn't that your alma mater?
Yeah, same colors. See, we're all consonant here.
Go.
So the 3 basics of stewardship: personalized for interest and potential, frequent and consistent, and the very active step of evoking satisfaction and partnership. So the strategy behind stewardship is really to build towards an increased engagement, a larger gift, an ultimate gift. Ultimate might maybe being, a leadership gift or gift at their highest level, and a planned gift through their bequest. So stewardship in and of itself needs to be able to pivot to and be connected to actually asking for support. So if you're with an organization or institution that has maybe what might be considered a luxury of having a dedicated stewardship person, great, but that person has to be integrated into the fabric of the giving of the request of the appeals. If this is just a part of your job, I would still say think of each conversation, each interaction as part of that moves management approach and how you're going to get them to that next step. The partnership um, really defines being an active role for that prospect, not a passive one. You not speaking to them entirely, but you doing a lot of listening and understanding what's important to them.
The only thing I would add on frequent and consistent, Teresa, is that for many of you, you may have things that are limiting their ability to offer with the kind of frequency they do if people maybe donate as part of their visit or on-site time with your institution. So for many of our faith-based institutions, they're adapting to online giving. So those are things you want to think about, what may be limiting their ability to fulfill a commitment. So that comes down to that frequency and consistency and how that might need to adapt.
So here's a little vignette you can read at your leisure afterwards, but I mean, the bottom line on this is an annual fund donor who became an extraordinarily generous donor to the university where I held a position. It's very touching, I think, if you read this description, that the formal thank you was a red maple tree. The person did not want a building named, did not want an endowed professorship or scholarship name, but was very pleased with this idea of a red maple. And, you see there's some connection with his family and in evoking a boyhood memory. So a few other details in this is that it was near the building that he had given significantly to. So there was an association with the impact of his gift, but obviously in a very beautiful way. This donor you see from here felt great satisfaction of it. The recognition also brought in memories of previous generations and in a way allowed his family to be part of the gift in a new kind of way. And it also shows, a great deal of thoughtfulness on the part of the institution to be as creative as this. So major gifts is not really that separate from the annual fund. As you all know, the annual fund is a building block towards these kinds of gifts. And I would say if you create this culture of stewardship, that it will very naturally be part of all the ways that you're relating to a donor. So let's segue to the message part, the 2 of the 3 points that we would like to make today. Mission moments leading to solicitation, balancing the present challenges in our world and the forward path, and keeping in the context of our times. So as far as mission moments, some of the appeals that we've found most successful in the spring that we think are particularly important for the fall is that there are mission moments articulated, primarily through electronic communication, videos in particular, that can lead towards the ask. So these mission moments vignettes, stories about faculty, stories about clients in the case of social service, those that are non-confidential situations that can be related, stories about nursing care, patients or whatever, that can all crescendo to the solicitation. So the first outreach is and it's very straightforward and easy now that everybody is used to relating online like this. The balancing the present and the future, let me just say that kind of in the middle of a number of debates about this with projects that I'm working on or some of our clients is how much do we mention about what's going on in the world? And I would say that, if you don't allude to what's going on in the world, whether it be with even if it's simply with a sentence or long or more, but even if it's simply with a sentence, you could run the risk of being tone deaf or very disconnected with what's happening. The other side of talking too much about it is people that have said, everybody's tired of hearing about it. We don't want to overdo it. That's the other side of it. Again, I think it's a great opportunity to engage some of your donors and prospects in giving you feedback on the message. Yesterday in a conversation, someone said to me, well, if our donors want to know more about what we're doing, they could just go to our website. Now, that's a big step from a written appeal and then going to the website. Now, if you had done an e-appeal and had an active link to then pivot to something else, that's one thing. I could agree with that argument a little bit more. But if you're talking about a paper appeal and somebody putting it down and proactively going to a website, that's, I think, a lot of space between the two things. And then the timing. The one thing I would say about that, just to consider, is for electronic appeals that because things are changing rapidly, as we all know, they're the same and they're different all at one time, is that some of the electronic appeals provide you with more flexibility if something further were to happen in your home state, in your community, etc. Malpa, I don't know if you have anything you want to say about what's too little or too much about.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the key points. I think it is about being mindful of the way you're communicating and making sure it's not kind of a cacophony of all crisis all the time or an overload, but that there's a way that you are distinguishing the appeal amidst the communication, and maybe the embedded video. Some of the other pieces are ways that can again stand out and have an offering to them as well. And something that's distinct. So I think those are important elements to remember. But you're right, Teresa, many of the people responding in our survey even talked about the fact that, is there a fear or a worry about over communicating on the crisis? And I think, again, it's context.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So we're going to give you 3 examples. There's an awful lot of words on these 3 slides, but just by way of background, so I'm sure you're already reading. I'll read them quickly out loud. This is a social service agency, organization, some of their language. Most of our national programs started in direct response to what was happening in the world at the time. Mission, okay? Number 2, this season brings to light the convergence of issues, which were fundamental to our founding and remain at the heart of our work and mission, to serve those that live outside of the quote-unquote advantaged segments of our culture and society. So they take mission, they connect it to their work today, very clearly, very specifically. They don't require the reader to make the connection, they state it outright. And number 3, which is the ask, we can continue, we can do it, but with your help. Here's an ask. Mm-hmm. The intersection of the pandemic and racial injustice creates a heightened intersection where our organization is already a leader for 150 years and where we continue to need your partnership and support. There's more words around this. There's more imagery around this. Just wanted to give you an idea of mission, connecting it today, and request for support. Mm-hmm. All right, the second example we have here, second of 3, is a college model, and this is a public institution. And so the first bullet there, first box, is as a public institution, the college is committed to providing a range of opportunities for our community to learn about how individual contributions to diversity and inclusion strengthen the learning and working environment for all. So this is facts, all right? We talked about the facts, feelings, future. Here's facts, here's mission, and also showing mission in the broader perspective of public institution mission. Persistent impact of COVID-19, our students are returning to campus in phases, deliberate and intentional strategy, all right? So this talks about the future, what's happening now. And the third is, in view of all this, and this was the college president's words that we're going to probably elaborate on in this appeal, but the college president describing in many circles that he's especially awed by the students' resilience, and frankly the faculties as well. He's talked about that, and their commitment to their own future, and how this impact and this institution then impacts their lives. Join me. So there is the invitation again. Feelings of the leader. So it's not a weakness to show a kind of emotional reaction to what he's experiencing as a leader, but it's also showing that students are number 1. So I think those 3 things are important.
The other, I would just pop on to that notion of invitation that I think is really an important way. There's an art to that. And that invitation is so critical right now when we are feeling disconnected, because that invitation is really calling us to come in and to share our belief in this common mission. It connects us as community and support of an organization. And so rather than the ask from a need, while need can drive, and certainly need does propel and drive many of our annual fund support appeals, there's also great value in inviting people in and reconnecting them as a part of that community of your organization and being a part of the good work that it does as a result of their annual fund support. So that's a subtle piece, but I think in this instance, it's one that we're really hungry for.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say one thing, if you could go back to this, join me is always very powerful. And in this case, I don't know if it's in this appeal or another, but this leader often talks about he and his wife's own philanthropic support of the institution. So I think that's important as well. So our next and final example before we get on to wrapping up messaging is this healthcare model. Institution, and some of what they're saying is we've reacted quickly to the crisis, often instituting protocols before they were mandated, the virus, but nonetheless, this is the reality. The virus did have an impact, particularly because they serve the frail and elderly, and there's been a tremendous emotional toll. So here we have educating them about what did happen, educating them being the reader, the constituent, and showing the emotional support, the emotional impact as well. So where's the financial impact? The reality is that we're having some trouble, right? Because increased costs and lower admissions. A cycle of people being afraid to put their family members into an elder care facility because of the pandemic. So these institutions have had a double hit. But they are showing a path forward here by asking, we need your help now more than ever. Now, these are just kind of articulation of sequence. I don't mean to say that this is by all means everything. And really, let's face it, the other topic that everybody talks about with annual giving, capital campaigns, anything, is the human stories, is storytelling. That's part of it. So we can show the impact, the emotional impact on a healthcare worker by telling that healthcare worker story. We can show the impact on a family by having them describe their gratitude. You know, we could certainly describe the gratitude of a family by telling their story, telling where that student came from and what their situation was. So by any of this stuff, I don't want to diminish storytelling at all, because frequently, if you have a boxed quote or case study somewhere in your material, you know that frequently that's all that people read. So those need to be powerful. So don't message in a vacuum, but test market. As we said before, this is one of our themes. It's done for capital campaigns, case statements, messaging. Why not do it for annual fund? So it's good practice, I think, all the time, but particularly now because of what's happening. So one-on-one conversations engage prospects. They bring people in who might be new to talking to you or with you. And, you know, we think about this all the time. And at an institution, we could get very insular in our planning. So, you know, it's great to take a step back or a step out and have others comment on our message, on the stories that we pick, on how we tell the stories. I would do all of that. Virtual focus groups, you know, the benefit of a group discussion, limited in size, but carefully scripted, and even including a written questionnaire afterwards, perhaps, that allows people to feed off each other and give reactions to commentary. So that's another way that you could do it in a virtual focus group. And of course, we talked about e-surveys, but here's where you can get some data, some real quantitative information about that. And I will say that it plants the need in a very strategic way, or plants the messaging to those prospects in specific ways, whether they be one-on-one, virtual, or e-survey.
So Teresa, we've got a question that this may be an opportune time to address, that it's about what are your thoughts on shifting from an annual appeal to biannual or a twice a year outreach in this time?
Well, if you mean more than one outreach, definitely already should be doing that. You mean asking for support more than one time for a year,
Right.
Or having two different messages? Yeah.
This is coming from institutions that generally do from a traditional stewardship model. They'll do a once a year annual appeal for stewardship, that this is your commitment for the year. And oftentimes that isn't revisited a second time. And that standpoint of what's the opportunity, and I guess I would be curious your thoughts. I've got
Right. Oh, I know you have some thoughts too. That's good. So one of my reactions would be that we are seeing in some cases hesitancy about making full commitments. I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'll pledge this amount versus that. So you're talking about like an annual commitment that might be part of a stewardship drive, or using stewardship in a different way. But okay. So I think if you're asking them more than once, you're allowing and providing the opportunity for people to think about it a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And the circumstances we're in, gives you kind of the perfect reason to encourage them to make a commitment now, but also gives you an opportunity to revisit a second time. So I would, maybe less traditional than you're used to doing, or that your constituents are used to doing, but I think these times require creativity, and I think people have a greater understanding of you doing things a little bit differently. That maybe you then continue from there on. But this is kind of the perfect time to break the box a little bit.
I would agree. And I think it really ties into what we're talking about here with test marking. And it's a perfect time to have that conversation and to not make any presumptions or assumptions, because it is a time to say that maybe if giving is down, is there an increased need? Donors may not be aware of that, while you internally are very mindful of the shifts that have happened economically with your institution, but your donors may not. And so the way that you're communicating with them and sharing with them how the year has progressed, and that this is a year unlike any other, really is a chance to have that, to extend the opportunity for those that may have the capacity to increase their gift, give a second time. Maybe those that did not support previously, but who say, no, now I really see the value and I want to step up. But I might encourage, as you did, Teresa, to just say that this is a time to approach it differently than maybe you have, because it's not the de rigueur automatic piece of this is when the appeal comes out, this is when someone makes their commitment. We're talking about a unique circumstance. So let's approach it in a unique way.
Yeah, and I think if you ask in a sensitive way, in a way that's very much connected to what your needs are, and you explain them, there's no reason to apologize. You just do it in a very sensitive way. And, those that are committed to you want to know what's happening. I've had remarks in some of the conversations I've had with some donors saying, I thought they'd be more aggressive with me. Aren't they having trouble too? So just think about that, and think about those. If they're connected to you and connected to your mission, they want to help. As long as you word it correctly, I think you're in fine shape.
Great, great.
So keeping an eye on our clock here with the last handful of slides here. Everybody, we've all seen gift pyramids, right? Different kinds of things. They might be the favorite shape of a fundraiser, but I was thinking about it in segmentation, matching the impact. So the highly personalized being the top of your pyramid gifts. So there is a pyramid, whether it's annual fund, or people think of it for a capital campaign, but all annual funds, the distribution of prospects or donors, is going to follow this pyramid shape, being as highly personalized as possible for that top of the pyramid and spending most of your time there, because they are going to have the greatest impact. But those consistent middle donors, where you want to take that 45% and increase it, and grow that, is where you have to be consistent and meaningful. And then I think some of your non-donors, occasional donors, even lapsed donors, might be a place where you could do some test marketing of some creative messaging, or take even a little bit of a risk. And by risk, I mean, your messaging is still done with all respect, all connected to your mission, etc. But some of the language might be a little different, or some of the imagery, or some of it might be generationally connected. For example, there's plenty of studies out there, you can read them online, about how you communicate to different eras or different ages of donors, what kind of imagery they like to see, or what kind of messaging. But you could do some test marketing with that, because the risk is low, because this is not a group that's giving tremendously anyway, so to speak. But the benefit is that you could take whatever success you have and use it elsewhere.
I would say this could be a place where you're generationally thinking about social media outreach, to begin to get to message differently, to message in new, take the same message, but through different channels. Because we think about the idea of subscription, which is very common in consumption, But do we think about it in terms of giving and the opportunity to just create that systematized, sustained support? So that's something to think about in those opportunities to be creative.
Very good. Yeah. So here we have segmentation plus one. Boy, I have heard so many people saying, I haven't gotten to that yet. I usually did that in June. I usually did that in July. I mean, because everybody's doing so much more. But if a donor is lapsed, the longer they're lapsed, the less likely they are going to come back. I know one institution that got behind on some of their monthly giving renewals, so I would say there's no time like the present to try to catch up with that. One-on-one for major, use Zoom. Don't assume. I'm gonna trademark that. No, don't assume Zoom. Don't assume they're not going to give. Mm-hmm. Don't assume it's a hard time for everybody. Request time to ask. Again, just in a recent conversation with some major gift program people, and they're concerned about segueing to that major gift ask. I said, listen, you're going to get some no's. It's like you got to get in the batter's box to have a chance of getting a hit. And, they're very respectful people. They're not going to offend anybody. You got to ask, okay? Create appeal and interest areas. So, from social media hits and other ways that are beyond my capacity to understand where and how people visit your website and click on different things, that you could see what interest there might be. And I would say that some of the special appeals we saw in the spring did bring out new donors, and I would just say that's a perfect time for a welcome packet, quote unquote, electronic, special welcome connection for them as first-time donors to then build upon. So look at that for your new donors. Segmentation plus one. The most consistent annual phone donors are typically the most predictable bequest prospects. We think of them, when we start segmenting and saying, oh, okay, let's look at anybody who gave $1,000 or more last year, or 500 or more. Great to do, but looking at consistent donors or number of gifts over a number of years, that's where frequently bequests will come from. And you've all had evidence of that when an unexpected bequest comes your way. They weren't on your radar at all. Well, yeah, you look back and saw they gave $25 for 20 years in a row. Look at that. Melpo talked about monthly recurring donors. Yeah, that's a way for predictable income, but also don't forget the time of year when you're going to ask them to increase. And certainly don't forget to have that trigger as to when their credit card, if that's how they give, how their credit card expires and to have to renew. And don't be afraid to go back to them. There is one place that I give to monthly, and it's a credit card charge. And I will confess, it takes them more than one reminder to me from them to ask me for the update. I see it, I know I got to do it, I forget it, and then I get the second email reminding me, and I'm grateful because we're all busy, right? Mm-hmm. High capacity yet modest giving, extra attention and personal pursuit. So, you should be doing or can be doing wealth screening, but using the annual fund to get those more highly rated prospects, those who have higher capacity to become sequentially higher annual giving prospects. When you do wealth screening and you see somebody has 7-figure capacity, it might be a temptation to go out and ask them for a leadership gift. But if they're not engaged in the institution, if they're not in the habit of giving, if they don't have you anywhere as a priority, that's really a tough transition to make. I'd work on them more in annual giving. And if anybody thinks that annual fund directors are at the bottom of the ladder of importance in a development program, I would say that they are mistaken, and certainly that's a case that you could make for how important your role is. Over the years, I feel like people have gotten a little jaded about challenge grants. My thought or advice on that would be to keep it in a discrete time frame, to possibly use it for distinct aspects of your constituency, like gifts that increase by X amount, or never givers or never donors, and again, showing the impact of what the support will be. And to make it, if it's a match, it's a match. If it's a challenge, a challenge. What do I mean by that? I think sometimes people think, well, you're going to get the gift anyway. You don't need me to give. It's not a true challenge. If it's not a true challenge, then don't depict it that way. If it's a match and that you're earning that up to a certain threshold, that would be great. And yeah, so keep it real. And I will just conclude by saying, I mentioned at the outset of our session about Senior Gift Program. When I did work with Senior Gift Program, it was instituted by a trustee who offered a challenge grant and would match all initial gifts by students to their Senior Gift Program. And that's a great way to get them started and to get students into the habit of giving regularly. Right.
Excellent. So just as we come to the top of the hour, we just want to wrap with a reminder that, this is not business as usual. And while we're not necessarily giving you this little clue, we just know that for many of you, as you've expressed to us, there's been a sense that either, leadership within your institution, whether it's administrative or board or other constituents, that's not how we do it. We've never done it this way before, or let's just wait till things reset to normal or to the way they were. And we really think this is the optimum time to challenge the status quo. And there may be things that you have been sitting on, ideas that you thought, this would be great to try. This is the time. Everything is shifting in ways. So look at how you can go back to things like donor retention, mission, some of the statistics that we've talked about as ways to influence those leaders and really get their buy-in for a new approach, because we've got to consider every opportunity to adapt and also make sure that we're not hesitant to reach out to engage our constituents and our leaders in this conversation, because there are no right answers, there are no single answers, and they can evolve as well. I had one president of an institution said to me at the beginning of this, he goes, I told my team right away 2 things, be flexible and know that I'm going to lie to you. And I said, what? And he said he just knew that things were going to continue to change time over time. So what we're trying now, what we're working now, we're going to continually need to adapt. So it was this notion to, again, not be set that we've got to wait till things kind of get into a regular rhythm or routine. What we know is that this isn't the case. It's going to continue to evolve. So stay fluid, stay adaptive, and make some decisions and move forward. Look at the risk reward, but begin to do that. This is a chance for you to demonstrate leadership. A number of you talked about kind of holding on to your position, being relevant in this time of remote creativity, and taking a little bit of a risk here can be a great way to demonstrate your own leadership. And we're definitely at the ready here to help you kind of look at ways that you can take the tools and resources that you have to create a great argument internally and a great program externally. Mm-hmm. So
if I could add something just in closing, I would say that these webinars are designed to be as helpful as possible to everyone. Mm-hmm. And, it's sometimes challenging to be both broad and specific at one time, all in an hour. So, if there's something that you want to ask us about or run by us or email, we'd like to be helpful to you. So please just reach out to us. You could email or call. I think our contact information will follow. Mm-hmm. And happy to talk to you about it. Happy to have you bounce ideas or thoughts off of us.
Absolutely. So thanks for spending an hour with us and gaining some things. We got to all of the questions that were raised online during the conversation, but as Teresa said, please feel free to reach out. Again, you'll get the deck and the video to be able to review and share at your leisure. But we, again, appreciate you being with us and look forward to hearing from you if we can be of service. Take care and be well.
Thank you.